I hope this episode of the Traits Podcast finds you very well. I am going to be interviewing Mike Moreau again, and Mike is the president, the owner of Traits of Concord Consulting. This is such an amazing tool, and he's going to go into depth here, but before he does, I really want to throw out a couple of ideas. Number one, if you go to the show notes, there is a PDF that you can download or view that will allow you to follow along with us. We're going to be digging into people's psychology, into people's personality. And this will help you understand where we're coming from so you can follow along. We talk about a scale. Secondly, before you get into this, if you have not heard any of the other Traits podcasts, what I'd recommend you do is go to episode number 3. That was another interview with Mike and myself. The audio isn't fantastic, but it's a really good podcast that allows you to understand, again, what we're talking about. It talks about how traits follows a scale. And because of that, you can really zero in on what somebody's traits are, what somebody's personality traits are, which then allows you to find a better fit for every role in your company. I don't want to give everything away before we actually start the interview with Mike, but make sure that you go to those show notes. Make sure that you at least look at the PDF that we're talking about. Maybe download it, follow along. And secondly, if you need just a little bit of background, go back and listen to that other podcast episode that Mike and I did together. It will provide a lot of background, a lot of help. I will summarize it really quickly in a minute here, but it will help as you go through this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I so enjoy doing this, and I hope you are enjoying listening and gaining information as we go through this. Mike, thank you so much for doing another interview with me. I appreciate this, especially with a few audio problems we had that wasted some of your time. I apologize for that. Thank you for coming on here. And I am excited to kind of move into phase 2 or kind of a 201 course versus a 101 course when it comes to this tool, how it was created, and how this makes a difference for companies. So what I'm going to do is just summarize this really quickly. Last time I interviewed you, we talked about how the traits tool uses a scale. So instead of, for example, saying you like people or you don't like people, it's saying, well, you're kind of in the middle, or you like people a little bit, or you really like people, or you don't. You like kind of focusing on tasks rather than people, or you really like focusing on tasks rather than people. And because we have that scale going both ways, 0 to 5 both ways, we can get to really extreme ends of the spectrum. And it now provides more detail for a company hiring to say, well, hold on, we don't need a 3, we need a 2. We don't need a 1, we need a 2. Again, the equivalent you gave, the example was weather. You talked about, well, 36, 32, 23, those 3 temperatures are very different. They're all warm, but they're very different. We need to dress differently. They suit different activities outside. And because of scaling, this tool becomes really useful for dialing into somebody. What would you maybe just finish that off, that summary? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that gives you a good sort of idea of that, Mark. It's really just about, a sense of scale. And so if you think about everybody in the world and again, personality being so subjective, how do we know if somebody's more social or not than us, or more oriented towards this or that than us, especially when you sort of think about this from an interview standpoint or detail orientation. My version of detail orientation may be very different than yours, may be very different than the applicant who says they're very detailed about the way that they do things. But then I hire the applicant and I realize that they're missing a whole bunch of things and don't really see the implications of different decisions that are being made, or that they're doing too much of that. And so when you can actually start to use those scales and pinpoint, what is it that we actually need inside of the role, where do I fit on that, and what does enough detail or too much detail or not enough detail in terms of direct reports that I hire into my business, what does that look like for me? So that's how that scale can really be useful for people.
All right, let's take this to the next step. And we're going to give some examples of something that Mike was just talking about there. Let's move this to the next stage and say, part 2, what does this look like? Well, part 2 is, let's say somebody is on the scale of 1 to 5, they are very personable, or they want to spend time with people. Let's say they're on a 3 there. But when it comes to assertiveness, or somebody who's more accommodating, again, that scale there, maybe somebody is a 2 on assertiveness, meaning that they are fairly assertive. You can start to see some competitiveness in them. You can start to see they will do a little bit more to get what they want, or to work towards their goals. They're a little bit more comfortable with risk than somebody who's on the more accommodating side. So if we've got somebody who is, again, 3, really, really, really like people, they will seek out opportunities to spend with people. But on the assertiveness side, they are starting to get competitive. They're a 2. And again, I'm using these numbers for the audience. I know that you can't picture this right now, and this is a very visual thing. But if you think 3 for how much somebody wants to spend time with people, and 2 for how competitive they are, or assertive they are, or how much risk they're willing to take on, that 3 is higher than the 2. If you have that in your mind, Mike, explain how somebody's going to show up in an office. How is somebody going to show up in a job when they have more of that draw? They're more extreme on the one end than the other.
Yeah. So you're really starting to talk about what sticks out most about that person, and what sticks out the most, and then what are the impact of the other traits that come in. And just again, for that visualization of scale, the scales go from -5 to +5, so 0 being the average, and the higher that moves up over onto the right hand side. So as you say, Mark, 3 on sociability, 2 on assertiveness. It's sort of like those 2 traits really stick out in that person, and so, what do you get overall? You get somebody that's just sort of this ability to be able to attract attention towards them with their sociability. Never a loss for words, and this ability to be able to engage a whole bunch of different people in conversation. And but really, it sort of depends when you think about somebody that's maybe a 2 on assertiveness. What happens when we slide the sociability back and we change the angle of that? And now you start to get a same level of assertiveness too, but you get one person that's really social, and you get the next person really social and with a really strong desire to be seen, heard, and liked by other people. And as soon as you take that sociability and you find the next person who's maybe a 2 on assertiveness and a 2 on sociability, it's kind of like that assertiveness comes across in a different way. You see it in a different way because they're just, that person doesn't need the spotlight as strongly. They're maybe sort of figuring out, okay, is this a results-oriented conversation, or needing to be liked type of a conversation, and almost sort of an inner battle that they can go through with those 2 things. And then again, when you think 2 assertiveness and 1 on sociability, now you have somebody that's a little bit more results oriented. They stay quieter in the room. They listen to the room a little bit more. Same level of assertiveness, sort of this confidence and this ability to challenge people, but really different in terms of how just one trait starts to impact how we see that, and how that comes across when we throw somebody like that into the room.
All right, now I always record my intros and outros after the interview, so I'm just going to take a quick break here and just remind people. So in the intro, I will be talking about, you will have already heard it, that we will be attaching a scale here that you can look at. Okay, and you can measure this. So go back to that sheet or that PDF that we're giving you, and look at where a 2 or 3 is on assertiveness. Look where 2 or 3 is on sociability, and just see how these dots are moving as Mike is talking, and what difference that would make. And I'm actually going to pick somebody. I'm going to say, if you had a director of a department in your organization, and they were a 3 on assertiveness and a 2 on sociability, how would that person show up in the room? What are some things that you're going to be noticing right away about that person, Mike?
Yeah, well, 3 in the population, it's just they're so assertive, even aggressive in terms of the way that they show up. More often than not, their way is the right way. They may not admit that to you, and yet every meeting that we look at that person has walked into over the last month, it always gets steered their way. So there's lots of intensity around that in terms of always challenging the status quo, always pushing for more, always challenging people to do better. And we start to notice that person can sometimes almost overpower people. This need to be liked isn't as strong in them. And so it's more about the result. And are you delivering on the result that we've put out in front of ourselves here? Again, challenging different people in the room, willing to make people feel uncomfortable in the room, and it's kind of like that's a regular thing inside of a meeting with this individual. They just are able to turn up the heat in a lot of those scenarios. So that's what you get when you get higher assertiveness, 3 on assertiveness, 2 on sociability. Great salesperson, great ability to be able to influence and move things, but absolutely you sort of feel the pressure of that in the room when that person comes in.
That's something that I've seen, is that, again, this is great in roles where somebody needs to hold others accountable, because that their focus on the goal, their focus on where we need to go, takes a little bit more precedence than how somebody might feel in the moment. Even though they care about how people are feeling, that goal orientation is maybe taking a little more precedence. So they're okay if there's a little bit of discomfort in the room, as long as the goal is reached, correct?
And for them, Mark, they honestly don't even feel it. So again, this almost this idea of relativity. When you take somebody that's a 3 on assertiveness, they're not being aggressive. They're just being, Mike on a regular day. And yet, how is that seen by somebody who is 0 on assertiveness? And that's the big thing. It's kind of like, geez, I just walked into the meeting and thought, that I was just doing my regular thing. What's the big deal? And meanwhile, in the as you walk out of that meeting, you kind of realize that there was potentially some damage done, because the project that this person had been spending so much time sort of caring for and ushering along, and now the 3 on assertiveness, who really is more of a visionary, comes in, and because of what they learned in the meeting, comes up with a new vision or a changed vision for what needs to happen, and sets that course, and then out they go outside of the room, and that person who's a 0 on assertiveness goes, I'm not even sure what just happened there, and can be a little bit rattled from that. And I'm sure everybody's had that experience along the way in some sort of way or another.
Yeah, I think about one person that I came across that would look at somebody, like really focus in on them and say, this wasn't done. Why wasn't it done? And just stared at the other person. And you could see the other person shriveling in the room. And what was fascinating was, again, the person that was high on assertiveness, they weren't thinking anything was odd. They were simply asking, hey, this was supposed to be done. This wasn't done. So I'm asking you about it. But it was a very direct way of asking. And nothing was said until the person was going to answer. Now, what happened later on, and I saw this in the organization, was that the person who had been asked that question, who was lower on assertiveness and was uncomfortable in that situation, then stepped up their game, because they knew, hey, this is what's required of me. This is what's expected of me. And so I'm going to step up my game a little bit. And that individual, the director that I was talking about, ended up getting far more out of their people because of that. Is that common with people who are a little more on the assertive side in this?
Yeah, and what you're talking about there, and a little bit of what sort of comes in when we start to take a look at 2 traits as opposed to just one, is the ability to be able to have silence and wait for an answer. So that to me says high assertiveness. I'm willing to stare you in the eyes and call you on that thing, but I'm not going to fill the space with a whole bunch of sociability, the quiet time, because people that are higher on that scale need to fill the space. So who that director was probably closer to average on sociability, and so there's this gap that comes up between assertiveness and sociability that sort of says, no, I want an answer, and I'm willing to sit here and be quiet until I get an answer from you. And that's where it, again, kind of that whole idea of the heat in the room starts to get turned up, and so things that you can pick out in a candidate when they come in, and if you're a manager with that type of with those types of traits that come in, what is the impact that I can have on others? Well, the impact is I can intimidate people, and sometimes that works better, like you say, for the employee that now all of a sudden goes and knows that they can't get away with that anymore, so we get better productivity out of them. And sometimes it just it burns things and turns people over more quickly. So probably there was a reasonable amount of respect for the manager, for the director, when from the employee when that happened. That when the heat gets turned up, I know I've just got to be better, and I'm going to go and be better.
Yeah. So holding accountable, getting more out of people. It's a fascinating thing to pay attention to. All right. So with this, and again, we're not being super specific here. We're not saying like a 3 here, 1 here, but we're saying when assertiveness is fairly strong and the sociability is a little bit less than that or more less than that, even if they're both on the right hand side, with sociability lower, you're going to get this person who really focuses on the goals. Really quickly, give me a couple of examples where this person would be a fit in an organization and where that person would not be a fit in an organization.
Yeah. Well, we see that combination: high assertive, lower sociability, or lower to average sort of sociability, doing great in project management type of jobs. Again, creating accountability inside of the organization. You see that in again, I say project managers, special projects, operations. We see that coming out very strongly as well. Not a whole need to sort of influence a whole bunch of people, but just keep people on task and doing the things that they need to. You see that show up in litigators a whole bunch. Sort of this ability to be able to go and build the case, and then go in and battle that case out with a whole bunch of substance in terms of all of the research that they've done along the way, and go and battle that out. So a few different jobs like that show up with that combination of traits, and we see it sometimes in sales. They tend to be more of the salespeople that don't like going out and schmoozing. They like targeting a client. And then going after that client, who's the one person that I need to talk to in the business that's gonna tip things over in my way. I'm gonna go and make best friends with that person. Tony, there's a couple of different examples.
Where would it be destructive or problematic in a role or in a business?
I always see it in something like customer service. So when you think about customer service and you think about heat scores. And so in lots of customer service, it's sort of like you need to be helpful. You need to be helpful. You need to be helpful. You need to be able to, serve somebody else. And so customer service jobs tend to be lower on assertiveness. That's what you need inside of those positions, because everybody can help somebody else, but people that are higher on assertiveness, they've got a shorter leash or a shorter number of people that they're going to go and help with before they start to feel like they're putting themselves out too much. So when you take somebody that's high on assertiveness and you put them into a customer service job and they have unreasonable clients, then that assertiveness starts to come up and stand up for itself and push back in those situations, and maybe even argue with a client to get their way with something, try and win the discussion or the argument. No, sir, no, ma'am, you're being unreasonable, and I'm not doing that for you. Goodbye. And now all of a sudden, the customer service manager who's listening to the call is horrified with what just happened there, and scrambling to try and provide some sort of development to fix that in somebody who just goes back and by the 8th call of the day is now scorching the customer service scores that they're getting and not doing well anymore. So some jobs it just doesn't show up doing well in.
Okay, let's switch this. And again, the reason Mike and I are doing this, one reason why we're doing this, is to give a little bit more perspective, just go in a little bit more depth of how valuable the scaling of traits can be in an organization. So again, instead of saying this person is assertive and this person is social, we're saying, well, yeah, they're social and assertive, but it makes a difference. And you're going to be able to tell that difference right now. So let's switch. Let's say the assertiveness is closer to 0, 1, somewhere in that range. And let's say the sociability is really high. It's now around a 2 or so. What is the difference? Instead of having assertiveness high and sociability a little bit lower, now we're putting sociability a little bit higher and assertiveness a little bit lower. What is the difference this makes? How are we going to see this in a business?
Well, or see this in a person. And again, I think it's, sorry, just to take a half step back on this, it's sort of this idea that that the traits, the graphs really start to come to life as soon as you can start to pick up on some of these interpretation pieces that come out. It's like you go from just 7 data points to a significantly higher amount of them when you start to see that. And so when you get somebody that's a 0 on assertiveness and a 2 on sociability, you again back to this idea of needing to be liked, needing to be accepted inside of a group, very much consensus oriented. The person that goes around the business and just has got a network all around the business, a network all around the neighborhood. Why? Because they love nothing more than sourcing opinions and ideas from other people. People feel safe sharing them because they don't sort of feel like they're going to be challenged on those ideas or made to feel bad or uneasy and those types of things. So you've got somebody that just wants to go out and also find ways to bring people together and have conversation and share some of those ideas as well. So it's a good different way of sort of in terms of the way that those characteristics come out, but absolutely make an impact in the world in terms of the way that they go and do things that's different, again, just because of some of those leans that start to come in.
All right, so let's finish this off with giving again a few examples of the types of positions where this would be great, where sociability is a little bit higher than assertiveness, and a few situations where this would be awful. It would cause grief in an organization. And again, the point we're making here is that for every person, there is a role. For every role, there is a person. But if we're putting the wrong person in the wrong role, we have a lot of frustration. When we put the right person in the right role, things are just smooth. They just work so much better. So yeah, give some examples of where this works or doesn't work.
Yeah. So a couple of jobs that you can sort of think of. Those traits show up exceptionally well in sales. People that come in, more of an account management type of a sales place would be where you'd see that, where again, go and visit a big group of clients and make more inroads inside of those businesses. That sort of orientation, Mark, is sort of like they show up at the office and they immediately start gabbing with the receptionist or person at the front door, and then as they're walking down the hallway, they're almost sort of looking for somebody to glance over at them so that they can say hi, and now they've met Bill, and now they've met Jane, and everybody loves it when that person sort of comes along. So kind of that account management sales type of position is great. We see this show up all the time in HR. This ability to get out of the office and get out into the organization, have those conversations, be there for people that need to sort of yak things out and create more of that visibility for something like that in a role like that. Those would be a couple of roles just really quickly that you'd see that showing up pretty strongly. And then roles that doesn't show up, manager of an accounting team. When you have somebody that's that high on sociability, what do they want to do? They want to go around and see how their department is doing and find more opportunities for people to get together and talk. And typically in an accounting type of environment or department, you've got people that are heads down, bum up, get the work done, and now they're being distracted from that work, pulled away from that work. Or two, that person sort of says, well, I've chatted with everybody 3 times today and they're probably sick of me now. So now I'm going to leave the office and get out there in the business and go and talk to a whole bunch of people that are around the business, which may be a positive in some businesses, but now all of a sudden you have the accounts payable clerk that runs into a problem and can't find the manager because the manager's off having conversations with other people in the business and trying to push accounting back over that way. So maybe some more sort of extreme-ish examples of that and how that can show up. But I think just really important to be able to dial in what do we need inside of this position, and why are we seeing performance challenges that are coming in with certain people my manager's never here, or is tries to think things through on their feet when all I need them to do is look at the Excel spreadsheet and get focused on the information that's there and help me to actually solve this problem, and they're not getting that from their managers. So just all sorts of things that are important to look at as you're thinking about people, roles, and how these traits all sort of match up.
I'm thinking about some of our listeners right now, and somebody listening and say, well, hold on a sec. You guys said that this is different when one is higher than the other. And then Mike said a good fit for the first example was a salesperson, and a good fit for the second example was a salesperson. What's going on? And this is a really fun exercise for me personally, because so much of us try to simplify the world. And in simplifying, which it helps our brains wrap our minds around certain things. But the disadvantage of that is we don't see the differences between different positions. So there are different types of salespeople. Maybe touch on that a little bit. Where do you see the first type of salesperson for this versus the second? You did talk about both of them in unique roles, and you talked about a different role for each one of them. But maybe just summarize that a little bit so listeners are understanding.
Yeah, well, sales is such a difficult position to hire for, and so many organizations don't even really feel like they really get it right. Average tends to be the thing that they tend to come up with in terms of a comment around the sales forces that they've created. And so we did a little exercise recently where we went and built a bunch of job models. So if we think about a sales job, what's the best model to put against that, and lots of different sales jobs. Territory manager, that would be one kind of a sales job, but do you need a territory manager that's growing their territory? Do you need somebody to maintain that? Is the territory even in existence right now? Because that would be a third kind of person where you actually have to go and build the territory. Customer service, is this selling technical product, or is this just running things through a till? Even outside sales, are we looking for somebody that's just highly commission based and needing to go and target the biggest elephant out there and haul that thing in, or is it somebody that's got to go and touch on a whole bunch of different people and clients? So we ended up building out 15 job models for 15 different kinds of sales positions that exist out there. So, and they're all different. And so, you wonder why it's so hard to find the right kind of salesperson. Well, if there's kind of 15 different types, you may keep hiring this type when really you need this type. And so it's so tough to kind of get that right and get the right person into those seats. And when you start to think about, so I'm talking about 15 different job models, but each one of those has got these different angles that end up happening with the traits that are coming in to say, this is somebody that we really need more of this detail orientation. That's going to be the most important piece of this job. And do we need somebody that's going to be able to take time with clients, or are they going to be firing through a high volume of clients and calls and tasks that are happening during the day? Because, I'm just talking about detail and patience on that, but that can really change depending on what we need inside of our organization. So really being able to sit back and sort of ask the questions of, what is the job, what is the work that they're doing every day, and what kind of traits, and really importantly, what kind of combination of traits do we need in order for somebody to be successful inside of this job, and then of course go and find them and see what you get when you start to put some of those candidates against that role.
This is brilliant, Mike. And I'm thinking about follow-up podcast interviews for this one, because I come up with 1,000 questions as you're talking. And I think other people will come up with at least some questions that will be, hey, what about this situation? What about this situation? So we can use this tool for finding the ideal salesperson for our team that just goes out there and destroys all the average people in our organization and just takes it to the next level. Well, yes, we can find that, which is what I get excited about. But maybe giving people a little bit more information at another time. Just to summarize here really quickly too, we have just taken 2 traits out of 7. We've taken 2, and we've taken just examples that are on one side of the scale, and we've used examples that are just slightly different on this. There are thousands of permutations here. So much more than what we can talk about right now. But we wanted to take just this really quick example of what happens in these 2 situations and how does that play out. Again, we're simply scratching the surface of the iceberg here. There's so much more underneath. what would you encourage people to do to learn a little bit more or get ready so that they can make better decisions for their organizations?
Yeah, well, I think from a resource standpoint, honestly, Mark, there's a lot of resources at our website at traits.com. We've got a blog where we've got things divided up in terms of whether or not you want a little bit more insight about recruitment, whether you want a little bit more insight about managing people, whether you want a little bit more insight about the tools itself, and each one of these traits that you can dive into a little bit more. So lots of information that you can pull out from all of those areas. I think additional podcasts that we have that are going on, but I think probably the biggest thing is just trying this, and so. You're struggling to hire the right person, find the right person for a position, and really being able to sort of clarify what is it that we're looking for. As you were talking there, this dartboard sort of analogy came into my mind of just, stop just throwing darts at the dartboard, hoping that you hit on something, and that's kind of what on the occasional weekend with a buddy playing darts, it is just totally random for me in terms of my abilities in that game, but. I think that's something that you with a few tips you can get better with it, and now you can start to actually compete in some of the matches and get the right people, do that more consistently, learn some lessons over time. So give us a call. We can run people through the trait survey. We can talk about a job and give them some additional insight in there. So a few different resources, anyways, that people can pull on.
Excellent. Again, check the show notes for this podcast. We're going to be giving you some resources. We're going to have an email address that you can use to ask a few questions. Or if you really like this type of podcast where you say, oh yeah, getting into this a little bit more just brought this to life a little bit for me. If that's the case, shoot me an email. I'll have my email address here. You can reach out to Mike. But legitimately, if you want to test this tool out, I believe that Mike is willing to maybe make an offer where we can do a free one for you. This takes time and energy, and it does take some resources, but we'd be willing to do that if this is something you really want to explore for your organization or see what's available. So I'm going to give you a link for that, how you can get involved, and maybe see if this is a fit. See if this is something that can really help your organization. I know the answer for that, what I believe, but we want other people to see it for themselves rather than us telling what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can make that sort of thing work. Again, I go back to, and you heard me say this week, talking with a group, Mark, this idea of why doesn't every single manager know this about their people, about their jobs, about the workplace, and if we could impart that knowledge on more people out there in the world, how much of a better place with far less frustration we'd all be feeling because of it.
Absolutely. I'm going to give an analogy as soon as we say goodbye here. I'll record an outro a little bit later and give an analogy that just came to mind too. Mike, thank you for your time. You've given a half an hour here, more than that as we were messing around with things. Thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Mark. Appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you soon.
Because that was a little bit of a longer interview, I don't want to take too much of your time here with the outro. I just want to mention two things. One is I had promised to give you show notes and a link for that free assessment. I hinted at that free assessment. Go down. You can click on the link and you will be able to get a free assessment of yourself that you can use to understand yourself better. And I'm willing to bet that you will find this really, really uniquely satisfying. It's as if somebody is looking into my soul. The first time I did this, it was amazing because things that nobody had ever really known about me, things that I'd almost held hidden in some ways, somebody was able to shine a light on that, and it was wonderful to experience. The second thing that I want to point out is I mentioned an analogy. And as I think about traits in general as a tool, something that comes to mind is ChatGPT. Not that all tools are the same and ChatGPT is different than traits, but I was thinking if you wanted to translate, translation is a really unique skill. Translation takes years and years and years of work. You need to become an expert in two different languages, and then you need to also be able to translate connotations and ideas and feelings, and that's a very difficult thing to do. Well, if you use ChatGPT can do a phenomenal job of translation. Does it solve every problem that exists in translation? No. And you know what? It's still good to have somebody nearby that can check on the translation, check on connotations and meaning behind words. Having said that, ChatGPT just saves so much time that ends up being human hours if you didn't have it around. And in a similar way, Traits makes so much communication so much easier. You still want people around because we still need to check where things are going, how we're communicating, what's being done about this. But just as a general tool that makes things so much easier and so much quicker, and you see such a noticeable difference, Traits does that in so many ways. Again, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Mike and I'm positive are going to be doing more of these because I believe they're so fundamentally useful for any person in any company. I've used this for myself just to understand kind of who am I and where do I fit into this world of business, and it has been helpful for me as well. You enjoy your week wherever it finds you. Take care of yourself. We'll see you soon.